Hi Kyle, we're here
Pat.
today. This one's typically a little easier. Whoop, inspection, watch your step.
Okay.
We got our safety gear on today, but typically these are a little bit straightforward for the most part. So we're here today doing a pre-drywall. So some of the things we're going to check today at this particular location is the tightness of the building envelope, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Looking for insulation and the vapor barrier.
Energy efficiency, right?
Exactly.
That's what it's all about. So I typically start my inspections as soon as I get into the house. So if you want to take us through and kind of look at what you want to look for during this inspection, let's get her started.
Sure. So right now we're in the garage space. That's where we came into the building. So we'll start there. So in here you can see that we have an exterior wall and two interior walls, or I guess two exterior walls, two interior walls. So on the exterior walls, we've got the insulation with the sealed vapor barrier system, as well as the door or the wall right here behind us and this door. And then on the interior walls here, all we see is the insulation at this point.
Right. So some of the key things to focus in on here, or at least from my perspective, Kyle, is basically areas like these corners around any penetrations at the bottom on the shoe.
Yep.
Where it made contact with the floor. We like to look around here and see this nicely sealed, right? Again,
Exactly.
Same as this foam. Everything is to be sealed. You can see up here, it's also sealed there because there's a cold space beyond that.
Exactly.
Right? So they sealed to the first floor truss that way.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's a good thing to bring up too, Pat, is that right here we can't see the bat. Can't see the insulation because of the bat, but we'd want to look to make sure that vapor barrier seal goes up through that floor system.
Right. So let's get a little something to poke that up with, just to have a look-see. I always like to have a look-see just in case they didn't miss it. They don't do it on purpose, but I always like to look-see. So this area up here should be sealed either, and it is, look.
Yep, so you can see the rigid foam there, and it's sealed up with some spray foam, so that will continue that seal up through that floor system.
And plus it makes the insulation requirement too, right?
Exactly.
Perfect. So we know they did a good job there.
Yeah. Now on this ceiling and on these interior walls, you'll see that there's insulation there.
Yeah. But none of this.
Exactly. So in this case, what the reason for that insulation is because this garage is probably going to have less heat in it or no heat in it compared to the rest of the house.
Yeah.
So it's conditioned space versus non-conditioned space.
Absolutely. So although this is enclosed, it may or may not be heated, who knows? But as soon as you open this big door, it becomes unheated.
Yeah.
So therefore there is a requirement for minimum amount of insulation. So there's an RSI value assigned to all these components. But basically, in a nutshell, we typically want, in this type of application, an R30. Typically, in this outside wall, we want R24, and you can see that with the bats. And then typically, we treat the common wall between the attachment of that the same as an outside. So you can see the R24 bats there too.
Yep.
Sometimes you'll see R20 bats, which is acceptable in that application.
Exactly.
So the other thing I do like to see is, we should point out, is all plastic is not the same.
Exactly.
Right? So typically we look at, back in the day when I was your age, they used to take the insulation bags and put them on the wall for poly, right? But today we look around and we see this, right? This is what we're looking for, this certification of this poly. So once we see that, we know we got the correct poly. So it looks pretty good here. Some of the areas that we really want to see sealed up good, besides up there, down here. And you can see that they got some acoustic sealant here. And that acoustic sealant, should be caulked like a bathtub.
Right.
And that's because there'll be air infiltration between this plate and the concrete that could come in this way, right?
Exactly.
So, which really brings up a next good point. So in this particular case, this poly serves as both an air barrier system and a vapor barrier system, which are two different things. So vapor barrier always stop vapor diffusion. So when you got warm air in here, it starts going this way. Once it hits a cold surface, it condensates, just like a cold beer on a hot day. So that's the reason that the vapor barrier is there. The air barrier is actually to stop the air infiltration, right? Air coming in. So that's what will make your house cold. That's the energy efficient side. It's not the vapor barrier part. So this is actually serving dual purpose. And the reason we seal this poly so good is because of the air barrier, not because of vapor barrier. It's the air barrier.
And there's a number of ways that you can achieve that seal. Now on the bottom here, it'd be difficult to do it without the acoustic sealant. But now around boxes and things like you see there above the electrical panel, they have tape on that, which will serve the same purpose.
Yeah, and it should be the blue tape, right?
Yeah.
So blue tape is certified to go along with the vapor and air barrier poly, right? It used to be red tape in the day, but now it's blue. All right. So these principles that we talked about here are basically going to be applied throughout the whole house. So we'll have a look around and see if there's anything else that we should be addressing.
Yeah.
All right, Kyle, let's go in here around and have a look here.
Yeah, so we're on the main floor of the house now. So similar to the garage, we want to look at the insulation values in the wall system, as well as checking the vapor barrier to make sure that it's the proper type of vapor barrier, that it's a certified vapor barrier, and that it's sealed up appropriately.
Yeah. Is there any reason why this floor doesn't have insulation like that one out in the garage?
So the reason why this floor wouldn't have insulation in it is because it's a conditioned space. It's conditioned the same upstairs as it is downstairs, so there's really no purpose to it other than
no
for sound.
need to keep the heat in or the cold in.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So here on this rim joist, you can actually see how it's sealed up. Where it pulls out the garage, they had the insulation bats in, right?
Yeah.
So this one, they stuck some rigid foam in. There's insulation in behind that because the amount of insulation has to come out at least to the thickness of this wall.
Exactly.
And this rigid insulation acts as a vapor barrier and air barrier. It's sealed.
Exactly.
Right? So the wind and the moisture cannot get through it.
Exactly. And and on further to that point is a good idea to, if possible, check that insulation, that rigid foam, to make sure that it is appropriate for a vapor barrier.
Yeah.
Some foams are not.
Yeah. So as you can see, we got some more blue tape that seals up a duct for a dryer. I assume it's for a dryer. But the other thing we usually watch for is penetrations, like wire penetrations. And you can see them there. And you see a hole that was drilled here, no wire in it, but a hole was drilled.
Yeah, exactly.
And when that happens, it's basically a breach in the air barrier. So that's why you'll see them cover it with foam, right? Just to make that tight barrier again.
Exactly.
Right.
You'll see that a lot with wires and pipes. We'll see more of that probably upstairs.
And again, you don't have to do every penetration. Only the ones that go to the exterior wall that needs insulation and vapor or air barrier, vapor barrier.
Exactly.
Right. It's all about air tightness. And that air tightness, if you think about it, Kyle, I always try to explain this to folks. It's basically like a balloon, right? If I were to blow that balloon up and it holds air, it's good. If that balloon has a pinhole in it, sooner or later it's going to deflate.
Yep.
So it's the same thing, right? That's how tight these houses are becoming, right? So that's the building envelope. So a few little different things in here that we would look at to be addressed as well. So it's kind of the same principles that we've seen out in the garage. This is typically here because now we know the garage is on the other side of this, the attached garage.
Yeah.
So this becomes the same as an exterior wall.
Exactly. And this being the warm side of that wall, that's typically where the vapor barrier is placed.
That is
on
correct.
The warm side of the wall.
Yeah. But an air barrier could be either side.
Air barrier could be either side. Yeah.
The vapor barrier has to be on the warm side. So when it's combined in one, it's on the warm side. Perfect. And again, they sealed up here for gases as well, right? And insulation. So This is pretty typical application of boxes. You can buy specific things that go around them, and they'll just caulk or tape around them. This one they caulked. If I pull this down, there's like a bag or a box in behind it, so that goes in behind the electrical, brought out through, then they stick it down to this.
Yep.
You see that they did that here. They did that here. You can actually get electrical boxes with a foam neoprene gasket, which don't require anything.
Yep.
Other than the sheetrock going up against them. And the plastic just cut out around it and it just applied directly to it.
Another thing we can note here real quick, Pat, is the rough-in for the air exchange system.
Yeah, right.
So we got the pipes running through the house here. The machine will sit here somewhere, I assume. So that's a good thing to have a look at while we're in here, is to make sure that those rough-ins are in place.
Right, right. So some of the other penetrations in that balloon, right, believe it or not, are in the ground or at the deck level. So when they poured this cement and whatnot, when they did the rough-in plumbing, they always leave these little areas open because they know they're going to hook a tub up or a shower. So that actually is a penetration in the balloon or the building envelope. So that's an air barrier thing. So what they did is they just spray foamed the rest of that opening.
Yeah.
So that seals it back up. Makes the balloon tight again.
That's right, exactly.
It's a patch, as it were. So everything looks pretty good here, Kyle. I don't know if you're noticing everything.
No, I don't see any issues so far.
They have a double wall system, it looks like, or ICF. I guess this might be ICF. I'm not sure. But anyway, you can see the thickness of the wall here. So they even took the air barrier, extended it right out to there, right?
Yeah.
So could be a little pony wall with the concrete there, my guess. So that's why that's a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
All right, let's head upstairs, have a look. We should be just a little conscious before we go, just so I forget, just have a quick look under the areas like this too to see how they're sealed.
Yes, exactly, yeah. That is definitely an area that can get missed.
Because sometimes they'll build all this stuff and then they don't poly, right?
Exactly.
They can't reach it, but this one's done. And Kyle, we're on the top level. It's just a little bit different situation than downstairs because now we have a roof above us.
That's right.
Ceiling or an attic space, so there's a little bit different treatment at that level. What are we looking for up here?
So same as the wall assembly, we're looking for a vapor barrier on the ceiling. That's going to, obviously keep the vapor out, but it's going to hold back what I assume is going to be blown in insulation at some point here in the ceiling.
Because we don't see any bats or anything there now,
That's right.
So they'll come in later once their drywall's up, and they get their little tube up there, and they'll start filling the attic full of insulation typically.
Yep.
If this were a bolted ceiling, right, and the pitch was more than the 3-1 or 4 and 12, as I like to say, right? Blown in, they don't usually do blown in unless they have some type of baffle system. And the trouble with blown in insulation is it'll settle and run, right?
Yep.
Because there's little particles. So if there's nothing there to hold it, especially on the slant, then yeah, they have to go with bat or put the baffles in to hold the insulation.
Exactly.
Same thing with the walls. Sometimes we'll see blown in insulation in the walls. They're typically, they have a screening or something that they put in place with holes in it, and they stick their tube in there, and they fill up each cavity.
Yep.
What's the other type of insulation we usually see on sites like this?
So we can also see spray foams. So,
Yeah.
They'll spray foam the wall cavities. Sometimes they'll spray roof systems, which is another way of doing things. It's what they call a hot roof.
Right.
But typically we see them in walls where they'll come in and they'll spray foam each one of those cavities.
Right.
And essentially it creates a seal there. It's typically a 2-pound foam, and it makes it a lot more stiff. It'll stiffen the building up, but it also allows you to not necessarily need a secondary vapor barrier.
Yeah, and it does all three of those things, right? So
Yep.
It got thermal qualities, It's got air barrier qualities and it has vapor barrier qualities. So sometimes it's an all-in-one shot. Sometimes though, or most times, you have to add a little more to the spray foam to make it a complete air barrier. And those little items are these little cracks right here.
Yeah.
So they'll spray foam here, probably even there, but they can't spray foam in there.
No.
So they have to be sealed, treated the same way as the bottom. So sometimes they'll put plastic over that, or they'll just tape them up or acoustic them.
Yep.
And they have to do that everywhere. Everywhere there's more than one ply of lumber. So that's even places like this.
Yeah, because in that one
Yeah.
in particular, you can see that, you know, there's a fairly significant gap there. So if this was spray foamed,
Yeah, they wouldn't spray foam that, and that would be
No,
the area that the
that-
air would come in.
Exactly.
Same as along there. So those have to be treated, not just spray foam added to it. So there's good benefits of it, but one of the drawbacks is you have to go around and treat all these with something else. What about how they got it lapped and connected here?
Yeah, so there in the code there is a minimum lap there for vapor barrier.
Basically, they're saying we don't have to seal it up with this acoustic or tape if the overlap is on a framing member, this would be a framing member.
Exactly.
And the theory would be is if I overlap this one 4 inches and I overlap this one 4 inches, put the drywall up, it's going to create the seal.
Exactly. Yeah.
But when they're 90 degrees to a framing member, which is this way, they actually have to physically see it, because when I put a piece of drywall up there, it's not going to seal it if they're overlapped.
Exactly. There's nothing to squish
Yeah.
it between.
Yeah, so this one is done correctly because it's 90 degrees, but they have it sealed.
Yeah. And the same goes for a wall. Same principle
Same
applies.
principles, except at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
So there's no overlap on the bottom, so that's why we have to seal it like that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
Now this one, the only penetrations I see right now, but these are for these pot lights, which are out like this. So that one is typically sealed, but sometimes we'll see a little cut in the vapor barrier or the air barrier that needs a piece of tape on it. But this one's done out like this, so that one's okay. Mm-hmm. This one's not through yet.
Yeah. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, because
Maybe that'll just be a note that they're not sealed around the
yeah.
air exchange outlets, right? The ducts.
What about baffles for holding back insulation in soffit areas?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So the way trusses are made now, they have a very high, what we call a raised heel. Mm-hmm. That's where the portion of the truss sits on the load-bearing wall. Because they have an opening out there and they're going to do spray or cellulose spray in insulation, if there was nothing there to stop it, it would all end out in the soffit. It would just fall out in the soffit. They'd be blowing it in all day.
Yeah.
So they'll put some blockage in there. It could be insulation, could be a piece of plywood, whatever. But the trick is not to block off the airflow from the eave going to the attic. So they'll put in what they call a little baffle or some type up. It looks like an upside down W that they staple to the roof so the airflow can come up and they don't block it off.
Yeah. And sometimes when you have a vaulted ceiling or a sloped ceiling, you'll see them go up the whole way up to the peak, so that you get that constant airflow.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that airflow is important for
Ventilation.
Yeah.
Keeping that roof cool.
Yeah. Not only cool, but keeping the moisture out of it.
And keeping the moisture out. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So this one looks pretty good. I don't see too many issues other. Maybe a couple penetrations that need a little attention at a different time.
Yeah.
You see all the wires are foamed up here that go up this way?
Yeah, so this is a good place to check that, because we're obviously going up through the ceiling vapor barrier there, so we want to make sure those are all sealed up nice and tight.
Yep. And this one right here, Kyle, is a good example of a wire that goes through a partition wall that's sealed up.
Yep.
So you can see they seal it with acoustic on this one instead of foam. So it's sealed nice and tight. Same as there. Nobody's perfect. I usually always find one, maybe two things aren't
exactly.
sealed, but
Yeah,
you just tell them to do it before they put the drywall up.
Exactly.
So some of the other areas of concern are the ventilation and vent stacks, right? So they always go up through in the attic sometimes, so you want to make sure they're sealed off.
Exactly.
For airflow.
And the ones that are insulated, the flexible ones, can be, especially when they're in groups, can be very difficult.
Challenging.
To seal up. So you definitely want to check those.
Yeah, typically they'll spray the foam as much as they can around there.
Yeah,
Try to block it off.
Something else I just noticed over here, Pat, is we have a attic hatch.
Yeah. Which again is sealed tight to it around here.
Yep.
And this one's actually, probably if I were to lift that up, would have about this much insulation on the top of it.
Exactly.
So
typically what you'll see there too is you'll see some people will box that, so they'll build a box to sit on top of that to keep the foam, keep the insulation back, and then they'll add additional foam to the top of that panel.
Right on. And that's a requirement too, the attic hatch, and for that thermal insulation of it on it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Anywhere where there's a physical attic space that you can get into and access needs an attic hatch.
Well, I would say this one's a clean slate.
Yeah, I don't see anything on this one, so we'll do up the inspection report, get it off to the contractor, and move on to the next one.
Yeah. So the only note we'll put on there, or comment, is the attic is to be blown in at a later date.
Yep.
And we can check that on the final.
Exactly.
Yeah, make sure it was done.
Yep.
We should mention, just to be clear here, that this is our last kick at the can here, right? So we should be looking through the file to make sure there's no previous deficiencies. Sometimes they'll have a framing deficiency that they want corrected, and now's the time to see it. This one did not have any, so I guess that's why I didn't bring it up. But that's our chance to look. If there was a stud missing, or a header not quite right, or a beam, we can see it now. But once you put the drywall on, we can't see it anymore. So
exactly.
Good time to check.
Depending on the comfort of the inspector, they may say, yeah, we can see that at the insulation vapor barrier inspection if it's visible, and you just want to make sure that whoever's coming in behind you, if there is somebody else, that they're picking up on that.
Yep. Like I said before, this is our last kick at the can, so we want to get her. All right, let's go. Well, I wish they were all that simple, Kyle.
Yeah, exactly. But this one here was pretty good, so we'll do up the inspection report and get it out to the contractor, and go on to the next one.
Yeah, pretty typical, eh? That's normally what you see. Yeah.